And welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. President Donald Trump marks 100 days in office, saying, "I run the country and the world." In a historic turnaround, Mark Carney's Liberal Party has won the Canadian election. And as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy accuses Putin of another attempt at manipulation over his latest ceasefire plans, we have a special interview with the advisor of President Zelensky's chief of staff. To our top story. Today marks 100 days since Donald Trump was sworn in as President of the United States for the second time. The milestone has always been viewed as symbolic and a time to reflect on a president's progress. Over the last 3 months, Trump has continued to be a divisive leader. Critics argue he's overstepping his powers and damaging international relationships. But supporters insist he's delivering on his election promises by taking action. Here's a look back at some of his first 100 days at the White House.
I don't want to be cute. I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad. This could be so magnificent. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. I think that we will make a deal with China. I think we've had some very good talks, but we will have some very good talks remaining. And, you know, I view it, and some people say, oh, rush. I think we have a lot of time. Let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president. We need Greenland for national security and even international security. And I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it. Canada only works as a state, keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states, maybe our greatest state.
To talk more about this, I'm now joined by former Trump state campaign chair Rob Artlett, who is in Washington. Rob, great to have you on the show. So Karoline Leavitt has insisted that American people trust in Trump as she hails the president's historic 100 days in the White House. But Rob, the polls do show a very different story. Pew Research today shows Trump has a 59 disapproval rating. What's happening? What's gone wrong? And what are people's concerns?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and your audience. I always appreciate the opportunity. So let's be very clear. 100 days cannot fix what Biden did in 4 years. So the reality is President Trump is very focused on bringing his agenda, his policies to the American people, exactly as he campaigned. And so that's what you're seeing. The concern comes from the lack of patience. And I would say the mainstream media here in America displays. So the reality is President Trump has been very focused on national security, on border security, on peace talks, economic equity, meaning the tariffs, deregulation, and of course also removing fraud and waste within our government. So I think he's had a very successful 100 days out of the gate. And I think the American people and the mainstream media here in America who don't like Trump, no matter what he does, they're not going to report any positive or successes. They have opinions that, well, they don't like. And we expect that here in America from majority of the mainstream media. So, but at the end of the day, it's all about patience and putting America first. And that's exactly what people voted for. And that's exactly what President Trump is delivering to the American people, and for that matter, to the world.
So the White House team has been discussing their economic achievements today, the price of eggs falling and more jobs created. But do you think Scott Bessent ignored the big questions, especially on tariffs, which is causing global economic uncertainty? And we've also seen the US markets struggling through this period.
No, I think what he's focused on, again, and I personally call this economic equity. Here in in America, I should say, Democrats speak often of equity. Well, President Trump is delivering on equity when it comes to our economy. The question should be, why have so many foreign countries taking full advantage of the American consumer for years, if not decades, as it relates to their tariffs on American products? So to me, when President Trump came into office, this is kind of what he had, was it dealt with international countries on the tariffs that they were putting on American products, and the U.S. tariffs were here. President Trump is just bringing our tariffs to the same level playing field as the American consumer has been dealing with. Why is he doing this? Because ultimately the goal is to bring down the tariffs on all sides of the equation, to negotiate better opportunities and better deals for the American people and for the American worker. So for me, he's doing exactly what he said to do. And yes, there's a little, sometimes you got to take that step back in order to take two steps forward. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of taking a step back to get the attention of many countries and many companies to bring back these companies and manufacturing to America. And in many ways, it is working because, well, we know hundreds of companies have already committed to investing billions of dollars, that is totaling well over $1 trillion of investment back into America, which helps our economy, which helps the American workers. So I think we're right on track as President Trump has planned.
So, Rob, it has been an extremely busy 100 days, I must say. There have been moments no one ever predicted, from the tariff chart to the spat in the White House with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. But personally, what key issues do you think Donald Trump has delivered on when it comes to ending the war between Ukraine and Russia in 24 hours? That hasn't happened. Where do you think his foreign policy is getting him?
Well, I see, and I agree, his comment was just that, and ended on day one. Well, that really hasn't happened, but what has happened are conversations and discussions of peace. And we have to remember that in the context of the conflicts. And what I mean by that, when President Biden was in office, well, frankly, there was no public mention of peace talks really ever. It was more about more money to continue with the ongoing wars. What President Trump has done is now all we're hearing from both conflicts, and I'm talking about Russia and Ukraine, and of course the one also in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine and Hamas. The conversations today are not about more money, but the conversations today are about peace. So for me, I think there is progress. I know President Trump is a little frustrated because all parties have not really stepped up to the plate to do what is required. But I think we are further ahead today than before President Trump because of the conversations of peace. And I think that's a first step that you've got to get to, is to get everybody on board, at least engage in conversations with a focus of peace and not more money to extend these wars. So I think there is progress, but certainly a lot more work is to be done by the Trump administration and the other countries to bring peace, not just short-term, but long-term peace for all of these conflicts.
So Donald Trump said he was saved by God to make America great again, but critics would argue he has harnessed a package of change that feels nothing short of a revolution, creating global uncertainty, chaos and fear for the US economy and the Constitution. What do you think of those concerns that are making the headlines?
Well, I would say they're fabricated, and I don't think that they're real. What I mean by that is, again, President Trump is doing exactly what he said he would do when he ran for president this second time. So what he's doing is he's placing focus on America and making America first. And what does that mean? Well, you first start off by securing our border. You getting rid of the illegal criminals that are in this country, and that's what he's doing. He's deporting tens of thousands of them with a lot more to go. So he's safeguarding that. He's creating an equal playing field when it comes to our economy, meaning the tariffs. He's putting a focus back on American manufacturers and also back on the American consumer. So to me, he is doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And I think people should be concerned, well, because there is a new sheriff in town, there is a new president, whereas his focus is America first and not everybody else. And I think that is a welcome conversation and a welcome shift, if you would, here in America. And the American people voted for that. And I believe the majority of the American people are loving the fact that he's actually been doing just that. And I'll also add removing of the fraud and the waste within our federal government. We all knew it existed, but I think very few people believed it was to this level. So again, President Trump is delivering on that message and on that promise to getting rid of the waste and the fraud and the abuse within our federal government.
Former Trump state campaign chair Rob Artlett in Washington. Always great to get your insights. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
We can now go to Washington to join our correspondent Kate Fisher. Kate, great to have you on the show. So Trump's presidency is under the spotlight again today. What has he been saying to mark the milestone?
Well, as he likes to do, he's taken to his Truth Social platform, his social media platform that he owns. And I checked, his first message was around 8:20 local time this morning, where he put in full capitals, 100 very special days, make America great again. He then proceeded to post clips and comments from articles from members of his administration on the television, talking about all of his achievements. And I noted that over the next couple of hours, he posted 24 different ones of these. Lots of other people talking about all of his achievements. So clearly he is feeling proud today, and he wants to spread his pride, and he also wants to show other people what other people are saying about him, to say it's not all, me saying this, other people think it too. He will be on his way to Michigan, to Detroit in Michigan later today to hold a rally that's the heart, of course, of US manufacturing. It was one of the things that he campaigned on. And he will be there trying to sell once again his message that what he's doing is for the American worker and for the economy, even as his polling is slipping.
His critics are using today to point out where they think the president has actually gone wrong. What are they saying?
Yeah, they are saying that everything that he is touting on his social media is actually terrible for the country. They disagree with his foreign policy, his tariffs, what he's doing to the federal government. Democrats have been, will be and are giving speeches on Capitol Hill. They are intending to make this go on into the night, talking about all the problems they think that he's caused in his first 100 days. Some lawmakers and activists held a sit-in on the steps of the Capitol on Sunday to protest as well. They're also, for example, the senator from Maryland has personally reached out, a Democratic senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, personally reached out to Donald Trump over the case of one of his constituents who was sent to that prison in El Salvador, and the courts here have said he was sent without due process and unjustly. And so, Democratic senators also trying to get a reaction from the president today on his 100th day in office to try and get him to change some of the policies that they disagree with. Many Democrats, though, are concerned that their party is not doing enough to combat what Donald Trump is doing and not doing enough to protest it. And polls have suggested that Democrats and critics of Trump are frustrated by the Democratic Party not doing enough, in their opinion, to challenge what Donald Trump is doing.
Kate, but over the last 100 days, focus hasn't just been on Trump. It's been on the whole team around him too, hasn't it? We can't forget Signalgate.
Absolutely. Pete Hegseth, the Defence Secretary, has had a very rocky start. It was touch and go as to whether he'd even be confirmed by the Senate, because there were even some Republicans who had concerns about his lack of experience. And yes, then he sent sensitive military information on this commercial messaging app, which sent shockwaves across the world amongst the domestic defence sector, but also across the US's military allies. There was huge concern. You've also got Elon Musk, of course, President Trump's has been President Trump's right-hand man when it comes to gutting the federal government here in Washington, making lots of people losing their jobs, closing agencies. Donald Trump says to save money, but there has been a lot of anger here in the United States about what he's doing, saying he's going too far, too fast. And that has been reflected not just in Democrats, but also in some polls that show Republicans also think that's one area that he's taken things too far. And Elon Musk, of course, has been the face of that.
Correspondent Kate Fisher in Washington. We've had a very busy 100 days, us journalists, and I'm sure there's lots more to come. Thank you for joining us. Now, it's what's been described as a historic turnaround. Mark Carney's Liberal Party has won the Canadian election. That's despite his party looking like it was heading for collapse just months ago. But the former banker fell short of a majority government. He wanted to help him negotiate tariffs with US President Donald Trump. In his victory speech, he said the next few months would be challenging and require sacrifices. Let's take a listen.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me? Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality.
For the latest on this, we can go live to Toronto to speak to journalist Sam Jabri-Pickett. Sam, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. This was a historic win and an unexpected comeback. Explain why.
Well, I mean, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives collapsed. You said that Liberals were expecting collapse, and that's what happened. Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives had a 25-point lead going into the election campaign. They were coasting on grievance, on hatred of Trudeau, on really exhaustion with almost 10 years of Liberal Party leadership. But Mark Carney and the Liberals were just too much to handle for them. His record as Governor of the Bank of Canada through the 2008, through the 2008 financial crisis, his Governor of the Bank of England through Brexit, it left Canadians really wondering what the Conservatives were offering them. But more so than all of that, Canadians were offended and confused, and we very much felt this feeling of unity and this new wave of solidarity and almost nationalism among my fellow Canadians. And Mark Carney and the Liberals took advantage.
What issues does Carney need to address in the next few months, and how difficult will it be considering he doesn't have a majority government?
It won't be easy without a majority government. Justin Trudeau, while he had a minority government, was able to work with the New Democratic Party, the NDP, under Jagmeet Singh, who also lost his seat, like Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in this past election. With only 5 to 7 seats, though, the NDP really has the opportunity to hold the balance of power over Mark Carney's minority government. They only have 168 seats is where they're leading right now. They only have 155 elected at the moment. He needs to build. He needs to focus on infrastructure. He needs to focus on driving down the cost of living. He has plans to lower the lowest marginal tax rate to sort of ease the rise of the cost of living increases brought about by inflation. He wants to boost domestic trade. He wants to boost defense spending in the face of these threats from the U.S. president. And, you know, the NDP may be to the Liberals' left, but it's possible to work with them. And with the Conservatives having lost, there may be some Conservatives who want to work with the Liberals, too.
Let's talk a little bit about his comments about Donald Trump in his victory speech. He accused him of trying to break Canada. Do you think he will try and meet with the U.S. president?
Of course. And I think it would be against everything Mark Carney has showed himself to be if he were not to meet with President Trump. But here's the thing. 78%, almost 80% of Canada's trade goes to the U.S. The only reason there was a trade deficit was because we sell them a lot of energy. I think it would be really outside of what Canadians are expecting if he doesn't meet with Trump. You know, he ran one of the most anti-American campaigns in Canada's history. But we all want a good deal. You know, we all have friends and family that live in the U.S. Canada and the U.S. are and remain extremely economically integrated. And Mark Carney's idea of a good deal is really going to sort of push him over the line for a lot of Canadians. And advocating for Canada, Canadian businesses, the rights of Canadians, Canadian sovereignty are all going to be big things. And all those things need a deal. Mark Carney's going to be leading the G7 later this year. And when those meetings happen with other major world economies, which Mark Carney is familiar with, I think, of course, he's going to be able to meet with Donald Trump.
Sam, the Liberals, who have been in power for more than 9 years, have staged this comeback, as we've been talking about, kind of on the back of what Donald Trump has been saying about Canada, the 51st state, the big tariffs put on. I wonder right now, does Mark Carney differ from Justin Trudeau? Do you think Trump will be more prepared to do business with Carney?
I think you said it. They're extremely different, and their bona fides are different. Ideologically, they're different. In a lot of ways, Justin Trudeau's goal, just to give a little of history for your viewers who might not know, Justin Trudeau wanted to govern. He sort of came into power on the backs of a lot of failure. The Liberal Party had collapsed by their standards, and he was sort of swept into power. His goal was to govern, and he was a bit of an idealist, and the son of a former prime minister, of course. Mark Carney, he's coming into office with experience with handling crises, with interfacing with all these world leaders. And far beyond being governor of Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada, you know, he was head of the Financial Stability Board, and he was mandated by the G20 to develop global regulatory standards for the financial system. All these things told Canadians that Mark Carney was the guy to meet the crisis, to meet the moment of this crisis. I don't know if he would have run or if he would have even won without these threats from Trump.
Sam, Jabri-Pickett, great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has accused his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, of another attempt at manipulation. His warning comes after Putin announced he was planning to pause fighting in Ukraine for 3 days next month. Earlier, I spoke to the advisor of President Zelenskyy's chief of staff, Serhiy Lechenko, to hear his thoughts on the latest developments. Advisor of President Zelenskyy's chief of staff, Sirhi Lechenko, thanks so much for joining me. First of all, I would like to start by setting the tone. What is the mood like in Ukraine and in the capital, Kyiv, where you are?
You know, this war started by Russia. This was never our choice, and Ukraine resists our land from Russian aggression, and Ukraine is open for peace. Ukraine agreed for ceasefire on landmark since 45 and even more days ago, and this agreement was achieved between American and the Ukrainian delegation in Saudi Arabia. And Ukraine is open to have this ceasefire on the land, but Russia doesn't want. So we have daily air raid alert here in Kyiv and elsewhere in Ukraine. We have bombing of civilians. We have bombing of multi-story apartment buildings. Today was bombing of Kyiv again. And last week, 9 people were killed in Kyiv during one bombing. Before it was killing of civilians in Kryvyi Rih and Sumy. and many more examples that Russia violates the proposal which Ukraine and US made together to have the ceasefire.
President Zelenskyy has said that Putin's latest ceasefire announcement is another attempt at manipulation. What exactly does he mean by this?
A Russian proposal is to have ceasefire for 3 days, when in Moscow they're gonna celebrate their own holidays, and they're gonna invite some international guests, and they want to celebrate it in peace. But Ukraine has no choice, has no right, has no opportunity to celebrate during 3 and almost half year because of Russian aggression. And we understand that it's just a trick. Russia is trying to fix 2 issues. The first issue, Russia wants to answer something on the American request, because America is calling for long-term ceasefire, at least for 30 days, with the opportunity to prolong it. So they're trying to answer on this by this 3-day ceasefire instead of 30 days, not to show the total lack of will, but it's really a trick. And second, they want to celebrate with no alerts in Moscow. They don't want to have problem with their guests, and that is why they propose this. But of course, Ukraine will make our own decision, because we think it's just a decision of Putin to play the game instead of implementation of the proposal.
There have actually been 20 failed attempts at ceasefires. Both Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of violating the terms. Why is Ukraine not holding its side of the deal and setting an example?
When we had this Easter ceasefire announced for Christian holidays, Ukraine answered that if Russia violates, we're going to defend our territory and do totally what they're doing. That is why when they declared this Easter ceasefire and then immediately violated, Ukraine used the same tools to influence on Russia, because we're not going to see how they just destroy our land. So if they violate what they propose, we answer on this.
Trump claims Zelenskyy could be ready to give up Crimea to Russia. Is this the right time for Zelenskyy to concede territory to stop the bloodshed?
I don't understand the pretext of this question. Ukraine is an independent nation. We have our legitimate leadership, and Ukraine defending our territory because we never provoked this war. We are just trying to stop Russia occupy our land. And Ukraine always declared openness for negotiation and for ceasefire. And the ball is on the Russian part of the territory, or Russian part of the football field. They have to decide what they want, because all what they want, they just want to kill Ukrainians. If they're ready to stop the war, they can make it within 25 minutes. You know, during our interviews, they can do it. It's just to make one call and stop it. And if Russia is not ready, of course, Ukraine defending the territory which Russia is trying to occupy, and Ukraine is open for ceasefire on the land, as it was decided in Saudi Arabia 1.5 months ago.
Donald Trump and Zelenskyy's relationship has been in the spotlight, from the confrontation in the Oval Office to the picture in the Vatican Basilica. Was that picture a moment of hope for Ukraine? And did it mark a change in Trump's mindset towards Russia?
You know, I'm not in the role to comment American perspectives on this. I just want to say that Ukraine is open and Ukraine is ready to stop this war immediately when Russia stops it. And in this case, all meetings Ukraine has on top level are very important. We're very thankful for American leadership in this negotiation process. We had a number of meetings with American leadership, and our team is led by our president, our presidential chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Defense. They are often in Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine is always declaring that this war can be stopped by Russia, because Russia started this war. So all negotiation Ukraine is holding is to have a peace on Ukrainian land, And we appreciate the role of all mediators in this.
Serhiy, I appreciate that you say that Ukraine wants peace and that's your main focus. But what is Ukraine prepared to give up to get a long-standing ceasefire agreement? You've said to me, Crimea's not on the table. That's something that's not going to go away from Ukrainian hands. And also NATO, you know, it doesn't look like you'll be able to join NATO. So what is Ukraine prepared to take to the table to try and stop this war?
You know, we are in very, very small progress. We don't have even the on-land ceasefire. When we have on-land ceasefire, we're ready for further negotiation because we just don't want to be used by Russia when they dictate what they want, and Ukraine has to deal with this, has to accept or deny. We're ready for process, and this process has to start with ceasefire on the land. And only after this, as it was decided in Saudi Arabia with the American delegation 1.5 months ago, this process can go on. So that is why it's not the time to talk about this, because it's not the moment. It's not the moment when Russia demonstrates the will to stop the war. If Russia wants to stop the war, they have to finish the process of to stop this on-land aggression, and after this, negotiation can go on. It's very easy.
That was advisor of President Zelensky's chief of staff speaking to me earlier. We can now get the latest on the story from Moscow with our correspondent Dasha Chennishova. Dasha, thank you so much for joining us. There's growing speculation around the latest ceasefire announced by Vladimir Putin. What is the Kremlin saying?
Well, the Kremlin has been very clear about this proposed Victory Day ceasefire, suggesting that this is an invitation to start direct talks with Kiev without any preconditions. That's the warning that Russian Foreign Minister Serhiy Lavrov has used quite recently. We also have heard the Kremlin saying that they have not received any response from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on whether Kiev would be interested in joining this ceasefire during the celebration of Victory Day. And Moscow says it is a manipulation by Kiev not providing the response to the Russian side. We also understand that in Moscow there has been also sort of frustration. Moscow says it has not received any response from the Ukrainian side on whether they would be interested in the direct negotiations with Moscow. But earlier, the Russian side has been saying that they would expect Ukraine to take some legal steps to provide for the possibility of the talks between the two countries, because earlier Kiev has adopted a law which prohibits any negotiations between Kiev and Moscow. But also in Moscow, they say that the legitimacy issues around Vladimir Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, are secondary to the wider idea of the negotiated settlement. And they do say that, first of all, they have to get to these negotiations track, and they are quite willing to do so. And then they will be figuring out all of those details that will need to be worked out for the signing of the document. So in Moscow, there has been some sort of response to the lack of response from the Ukrainian side, suggesting that Kiev should be given the answer, as Moscow is willing to continue the talks and to engage in direct talks with Kiev itself.
Dasha, Trump claims Zelenskyy could be ready to give up Crimea to Russia. Why is Crimea so important to Vladimir Putin?
Well, Moscow has been in control of the peninsula for more than a decade by now, and the whole effort that has been placed forward into the reconstruction of the peninsula is tremendous. But if you look at the map, you will definitely understand that having control over the peninsula, and particularly the port of Sevastopol, means having a large and important role in the whole operations in the Black Sea. So for the Russian Navy, for for the Russian might in this region, it is very important. But also we understand that this is the port that is not getting iced, and this is the warm weather port, one of the few that Russia actually owns. So for Moscow, it has a very strategic importance for the trade routes, for the military routes, for the Russian security as well, as Russia has been saying that it has a very important role for providing the security of Russia. And we also understand that Moscow has had the so-called understanding that this peninsula has been gifted to Ukraine by Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet leader, but that has been Russian territory for centuries, and Moscow has been fighting for it for quite some time, and therefore there is lots of additional importance and value attached to this peninsula.
Correspondent Dasha Chennishova in Moscow, thank you so much for joining us. Now, travel disruption in Spain and Portugal has continued today after massive power cuts hit the region yesterday. Spain's King Felipe has chaired a national security meeting to discuss why the blackouts happened today. For more on this, I'm joined by journalist Mark Lomas, who is in Portugal. Mark, great to have you on the show. First of all, what was your experience of yesterday's blackouts?
Well, like a lot of people, I think it was around 11:48 yesterday, the power just went off everywhere. And thankfully, mobile internet was still available in a lot of places. It did kind of fade out throughout the course of the day, but people could keep on top of things and keep updated through social media and using their mobile internet, which was great. But yeah, just power out everywhere across Portugal, across Spain, across parts of southern France, and yeah, just a surprising incident that you'd never expect to happen, I guess.
Well, the lights look like they're back on, which is good. But do we have any idea, Mark, on what actually caused these? Because there seems to be a lot of speculation.
Definitely, it's very mixed. So on the Portuguese side, they're blaming extreme changes in temperature, and on the Spanish side, they're blaming interconnections between Spain and France. It's been quite galling, I think, for those in Portugal to realise how dependent they are on the Spanish electrical grid to serve them as well. And yeah, there was some issues yesterday because there was panic. You know, there was panic buying. I saw it at the shops. Long queues for fuel, long queues in the supermarkets, because there wasn't great messaging coming out from the government. And in fact, the Portuguese national grid, REN, at one stage said they thought it was going to take 7 days for the grid to recover. Now, obviously, that is going to make people go out there and panic buy. But fortunately, the messaging got a little bit softer throughout the course of the day. And yeah, by the end of the day, people were a bit more hopeful. And then about 1 a.m. this morning, mostly in Portugal, is when the power was restored. And today, the government is saying it's at 100% capacity again.
Mark, passengers are still seeing hours of delays in the region. What advice are they being giving? Is that messaging a little bit clearer?
Yeah, it has. I feel like everything has been a little bit clearer today. We had some bad weather recently here, and you get alerts from the government on your phone, and that's happened again today with a little bit more kind of clarity. People are being urged, obviously, to check their travel. There were 500 flights cancelled yesterday across the Iberian Peninsula. There were 35,000 people who were trapped at various points in Spain on public transport. People are just being urged to check their flights before going to the airport. And to make sure that everything's okay before they visit the airport.
Journalist Mark Lomas, thank you so much for joining me. A reminder of our top stories. President Donald Trump marks 100 days in office, saying, "I run the country and the world." In a historic turnaround, Mark Carney's Liberal Party has won the Canadian election. And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy accuses Putin of another attempt at manipulation over his latest ceasefire plans. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. Counterpoints with Melinda Nusafora is coming up next. Plus, of course, we'll be back in a couple of hours with a W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for joining us.